I know that a lot of agencies are contemplating Agile. I attended the DIR conference on Agile about 6 months ago. And as I sat at the table with other attendees, I heard people saying, they keep saying Scrum. What's Scrum? They keep saying stand up. What's stand up? And so we thought, okay, how do we kind of back this up a little bit? How do we take it to a level where it's a little bit easier to interact with and relate with? And so what we want to do is take you through a day in the life of an organization that is making that transition from waterfall-based methodology of projects to Agile methodology of managing their projects. We've been working really closely with the DIR. We have some special guests here that are going to help us with Q&A at the end on how do you contract with Agile, and we can talk about that. There will be time at the end for Q&A. So let me jump right in. We'll get started. So we have a couple of main characters are going to be here live in person, and then we're going to have some interactions for you. And to set the scene for you, so we have our character Sid, and Sid he's a waterfall guy, and he's not really so sure about this whole Agile thing. And then we have Josh, and Josh is our Agile Sage Spirit Advisor. Think of him like Obi-Wan, and he's here to help move things along and help him bring him into the Agile world. So both of Sid works for a municipal utility district, and they are under a big program to revamp the rebate system. And so they're working on water conservation, and they have to submit reports and get rebates back. And that's the scenario that we find ourselves in. And so let's take it away.
Oh, hey, I'm just calling you while I'm taking a break. Yeah, I've got a few minutes. I just want to vent. It's been real tough, this transition. I've moved off all the old project methodologies I know, and they've been really forcing me to do this Agile thing. And I just have to tell you, it just feels like this big excuse not to plan. I'm not sure how the business forecasts their budgets when we say that we're going to just be delivering these features every 2 weeks. It feels like this big excuse not to document, not to follow process, not to go through review boards. So it's just really, sorry, you got to go to a meeting? All right, well, I'll see you at home and we can chat later about it tonight. But yeah, thanks for listening. It's been a rough day.
Oh, it looks like somebody has the fresh waterfall blues.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of this over the last 6 months, and the company has been transitioning off of our old methodologies, and we've been moving to this Agile system and way of looking at stuff, and I just don't get how the business plans and understands what they're going to get. I don't even understand how they budget for this stuff.
Well, that's what Agile's all about, is taking control of that process. Think back, you had an unplanned change just recently. How did you handle that in grooming?
Wait, how did you know about it?
Trust the process.
Good morning, guys. Good morning, guys. We're having this meeting because there's some new requirements that is coming in. We'd like to talk over it before the next sprint. There is a requirement that needs to add into the app to bring in some report. Would you mind talking some more about it?
Yeah, so the legislature passed some new requirements. There are some new calculations that need to be made. And so what we've got to do is we've got to update the app so that the new requirements are incorporated, so the calculations will be correct, so that when we report the information to the water board, we get the proper rebates back.
Okay, I get that we need all this to be done in the next sprint, but I'm concerned that the feature flagging that I need for my development team needs to be in there. So, we can't do both, so we need to find some way around this.
Okay, well, we're not changing the way that the information we gather, so we just need to change the calculations in the mobile app.
Okay, I get that, but if we have to change the app, we're having to do a lot of work in the app, having to redevelop it and everything like this. So you just said we're not actually changing any of the data points that we're acquiring, we're just reporting it differently?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, what if we, instead of reporting directly from the application, what if we take the data and make a report and then drive the data right from the database and report directly to the water board? That way we don't have to recompile the application. We can just write a new report, have it pulled from the database, and then those reports can be sent to the water board. Will that work for you?
Yeah, all I need is the right information to get to the water board. How you do it, that's fine by me.
Okay, because that would reduce the development effort. That way we'd only wind up having to write a report. We could get the calculations that you need, and I think everyone's happy.
Well, and the legislature's probably going to change their mind again, and when they change their mind in the future, it might be easier to update the report.
Sure, I mean, now if we're componentizing it in that fashion, I mean, that's win-win for everybody.
Yeah, sounds pretty good.
Sounds good.
But can we just change requirements like that in the middle of this?
Well, he's the guy who's telling us the requirements, so I think he can.
That's the business requirement, is to be able to provide the right information to use the right calculations.
Yeah, all we're changing is the implementation, so.
So, I mean, it seems to me there were some changes you couldn't have planned for. Your team worked them out with the business.
Well, I mean, in our own process, we didn't need Agile to handle that. We had emergency change requests. We could easily do this for an emergency change request.
How complicated are emergency change requests?
Oh, those were simple. You know, if the business filled out their business justification, the form, it went to the review board, and then it went through architectural review. I mean, it's 2 to 3 weeks tops. It was really
Two to 3 weeks tops. And I'm just out of curiosity, how many of those were you involved in last year?
Oh, I mean, we did about 24 to 26 of them last year.
So excluding vacations, pretty much the entire year was an emergency change request?
Well, yeah, maybe we did those pretty frequently, but you know, like, with the right BAs and everything, and we could plan for all this stuff. So even though we had the emergency, I still don't understand how we're doing planning.
Oh, but you plan between every sprint. That's the first thing you do is your sprint plan. Don't you remember sprint planning? We just did this.
And I'll also grab this one, so it's in the same area.
Okay. It looks like we still have some capacity left. Sid, do you want to pick up anything for this round?
Oh, all right. I guess I can. And this one's pretty simple. There's almost nothing to it, and it's in the same area of the feature flags and kind of the ring deployment. So I'll pick that up and add that to my list.
All right. Well, looks like we had hit capacity since we have Frank out on vacation. Why don't we go ahead and estimate the rest of the backlogs?
Okay.
Let's go over the first reporting feature set. What do you think the estimate would be? Everybody has the number. Let's go over it. Have 5. And you have a 24. So what's your thinking behind that, Sid?
Well, it's the complicated report change, and I was thinking it's going to take at least 24 hours or 3 days worth of work, so maybe even more. So I mean, to me, this is.
Hang on a second. First, these numbers really don't represent the number of hours we're using. These are actually numbers in the Fibonacci sequence, which we're just kind of using. Are you familiar with that? Effectively, the valid numbers that we're using are 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Each number in this sequence is the 2 before it added up, but we're just kind of using them as a general thing.
But why don't we just use hours? I mean, that's what we've always done in the past.
Because this way we aren't completely booked into this exact number of hours, because there's always some things that are going to be a little bit unknown about this. So we're just giving a general estimate about how this works. So in the line of work that we're in, our general rule is that 13 story points is roughly your 2 weeks worth of work. So that way an 8 or a 5 is right around a week's worth of work. 8's a little more, 5's a little less, and then so on. A 1 is like half a day's work, a 2's a day, a 3 is like a couple of days, etc.
So for us and our team, that's why we're saying 13 is my capacity.
That's right.
Okay, so let's move on to the second feature. Let's estimate that. Okay. Got an 8 for this guy. Okay. So pretty good. 5.
But wait a minute, why are you estimating? You're not, I mean, it's Gordon, Jay, and I on the board. You're not actually going to be doing any of the user stories. Why don't we have you estimating?
Well, look at it this way. As the architect, I'm involved in this whole process, and I'm also accountable for what it is, everything that we get done. So the whole team gets a point in this. I mean, Gordon isn't a full-time developer either. He's a Scrum Master, but his opinion carries just as much weight as everybody else's. And because we all have a different point of view, somewhere in all of these views, we're going to come up with whatever the number needs to be.
Good. So, what are the consensus? Shall we go with number 8 since most of us have 8?
It works for me.
Great.
I don't know about you, but that felt like planning to me. I mean, you planned for the 2 weeks.
Yeah, I get that we did some planning, but I just don't understand how we can conceivably get work done and produce value in these 2-week iterations. It just feels like it's not enough time to do some work.
Well, I mean, you spend the 2 weeks and you get a focused amount of work and you scale the work to the 2 weeks so you can actually deliver that back to the business at the end of those 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's, without all the upfront planning and knowing what we're going to be doing for the next couple months, all of our work items still have issues. I still feel like we end up with blockers every time we're doing something.
Well, I mean, that's what your stand-ups every morning are for, so you can bring the team together and solve problems together. Think about the stand-up.
Okay, good morning, guys. We're here in the Scrum meeting. I want to find out what you guys did yesterday, what you guys going to do today, and any blockers. So, John, go ahead first. Well, here's the chicken, so we'll hear from the pigs. Jay, what do you have?
Yesterday I was in a backlog grooming meeting and I reviewed the requirements for the calculation. And today I actually want to roll out that calculation report or at least get started on it. But for some reason right now I'm unable to continue because the documentation from the state that has the calculation in it and what's written inside the acceptance criteria and the story does not line up. So I'm kind of at an impasse there. I don't know which one to go with.
Well, we'll put a note to that on that blocker, and then we'll get a hallway conversation and try to resolve that.
All right.
That's it?
So yesterday I worked with the Launch Darkly service. Going to be spending more time on that today, but I'm blocked because the darn thing doesn't work, and I'm not quite sure why we picked that. It's just not easy to use. It's not something that I think that is the right thing to do.
Dude, parking lot. We'll talk about it in the hallway.
So I'm blocked because I'm not sure how to use the service, and it's the authentication's not going. So that's what I'm blocked on.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So your team came together and you found some issues, but you're going to work on those issues, right?
Yeah.
So,
all right. You explain why is John always doing that? What is this chicken and pig thing?
The chicken pig. I'm sorry. So you know the old joke about the difference between a chicken and a pig for breakfast?
No, actually, I haven't heard that.
Oh, well, a chicken's involved, but a pig's committed. So the pigs are the people who are actually going to deliver the feature. They're committed to that success.
Oh, so then John doesn't really talk much during the stand-up because then we're the ones doing the work and he's just there supporting.
Exactly. The idea of a stand-up is to be very tight and lean, to very quickly just answer 3 questions. What'd you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And are you blocked? Is there anything getting in the way of that success?
Yeah, okay, all right, I understand. But why are we doing these every day? It just seems like it's a waste of time. Why can't we just have a 1-hour meeting, once a week and just knock these things out? It's like, why do we have to do this every morning?
Well, if you only have a 2-week sprint, that only gives you one opportunity if you have a meeting once a week to deal with any issues. What would you have done with that blocker that you mentioned in that stand-up if you had to wait a whole week to get to? What, it was Monday and your status meeting was Thursday? You couldn't sit at your desk for a whole week.
I guess you have a fair point there. We're trying to act quickly, right?
Exactly. So you ended up, organizing a little meeting, right?
Yeah.
So you had to deal with that. And let's look at what that looked like.
Hey, thanks everybody for being here. I looked real hard on your calendars and also on the available conference rooms to call this meeting together. I really need to discuss my blocker that I mentioned at the stand-up and figure out how I'm going to move forward on it. I'm still running into, I'm trying to read through the documentation, but still running into the same kind of authentication challenges that I was having, and then what I'm seeing in the service endpoints not mapping up to the documentation. So I really need the help on that.
All right. Well, I architected the feature flag servers in the first place, so I think I'm probably your guy on this.
Well, sounds like you guys got this going on. You're in power to resolve this. I have to go. So good luck. And if you have any more blocker, please let me know.
Hey, by the way, You don't really need to book a conference for something like this. You can just come by my desk. I mean, if we're just going to have a quick discussion about it, I think that would be okay in the future.
Oh, all right. I'll keep that in mind. Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, no problem. So what exact issues were you having with authentication?
It's
So that wasn't so bad, right? I mean, props for going ahead and getting all the conference room booked. But just out of curiosity, how many hours did you spend to get everybody's schedule lined up for?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's. I had to look for the right room since our office is pretty crowded and conference rooms are hard to come by. So that took a little bit of time, and so I did to go through and see what was available, and then finding time on everybody's calendars. That's all matched up. Since I really wanted everybody there. The PM, I mean, Gordon's our not PM, but Scrum Master, so he should have been there, right?
Well, I mean, but really the conversation was between you and John, the architect. So, I mean, from a lean perspective, we're just trying to get the team to be efficient. Then Gordon should only be pulled in when you're not able to get John's time or when you're not able to get the other people's time. So this is part of Agile, is you want to be lean. You want your teams to be able to be self-empowered to solve these problems on their own.
I guess it makes sense. I mean, because it's not like Gordon needed to take notes or do anything.
And you were good. Props. You didn't bring the business into this meeting. It wasn't a business meeting. Now sometimes the business does need to be brought in, but even then you can be lean. Jay had a problem and he needed the business. Why don't we see how Jay handled his problem?
Okay.
Hey Jay, I got your message. You needed to see me?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, this is regarding the rebates. I'm kind of looking at the attached date document and the acceptance criteria, and they're not quite lining up. I'm not sure which, calculations requirements.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When I got the legislative update, I went ahead and made the user story so you guys would be aware of it so we can incorporate it. But I had the wrong calculations, the wrong acceptance criteria in there. So I can update the acceptance criteria.
Okay, great. Yeah, we actually update acceptance criteria. Let me know, and we actually generate our unit test based on this information. So we want to make sure we get the calculations right. So
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks,
right.
Jay.
Sure.
Yeah, that was a lot simpler than how I did it. I'll give you that.
Yeah, use the right tools, you put the right people together, and empower them to solve problems, and they can move really efficiently.
Yeah. So the acceptance criteria. I mean, what I'm still trying to struggle with how the business can just update that, I mean, shouldn't they know this ages and ages before?
Well, let's talk about this example. So, I mean, this legislative change was due September 1st, so a very small amount of time. And in fact, it came out in the special session. So we're talking about an incredibly tight reaction time. He couldn't have he knew something was going to happen, and so he created that requirement so it could be estimated and put in the backlog. But frankly, when the legislature decides to do something, sometimes you just have to react. And the acceptance criteria is what we used to think of as a use case. It's the full-fledged, everything we need to know to properly develop and deliver that feature. And when we write those really, really well, as Jay did, we're able to then create really good unit testing. And the beautiful thing is when you do that over a project, you create regression testing. So now we can prove that everything we ever did always works because we're really respectful to that acceptance criteria.
All right, I think I'm already. So then if we change the acceptance criteria, tests will fail, and we'll know if we have to go back and change that.
Yeah.
All right. But I just have to say, it's starting, and that was the thing I was telling my wife earlier. It just feels like a Groundhog Day. I feel like I'm Bill Murray stuck in these cycles. It's just happening over and over and over again. And I'm kind of losing the value in doing all these things, all these different meetings every 2 weeks. Why do we do this?
Well, so every project has iterations. I mean, some projects iteration is the whole project. You get one iteration. And sometimes a project is maybe iterated on phases. So you're going to have an iteration per phase. Others, maybe a milestone, because milestones inside of phases. Well, in Scrum, we make our iterations as small as possible so that we can react to the business's needs. Have you ever heard about how fighter pilots train?
Yeah. Actually, my dad was in the Air Force.
Oh yeah, so you're familiar. There's 4 phases to a fighter pilot's decision making when they're in the air. They observe, they orient, they make a decision, and then they act. So if you have a project that observes, orients, makes a decision, and acts at a whole project level, and you have one that does the same thing every 2 weeks, which one is going to track to the business's needs more accurate?
Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense because I mean I'm just thinking back to our old projects and that last mile. Oh my, those were always painful.
Who loves the last mile? Nobody loves the last mile.
Yeah, I mean it was hard because it's like by the time that even if our requirements were locked, by the time we were getting ready to deploy, the ops had changed their whole environment. So then we were always having to go back and make sure that they were prepped and crash, the end of the plan to write more documentation, but then come back and update our stuff because the operational environment had changed. So yeah, and it was frustrating because then we looked bad because we were always missing our commit dates and the training dates for the business for when we launched new things. So it was kind of painful for that, and we didn't like looking bad because we were just known for missing our dates, and that wasn't fun.
But in a sprint model, every 2 weeks you demo to the client. So instead of having the last mile, which really should be called the last marathon, if you think about it, it's never a mile. But instead of that, you have very small, broken up deliveries. And the client gets to decide if this is what I needed, what directions do I need to change, and they get involved in that success. Well, I mean, let's look at your demo, right?
All right.
Welcome to the Sprint demo meeting. It's been 2 weeks since we looked at some cool stuff, and the team has worked really hard in the last sprint, and we're here to demo to the business what we've done. So Sid, would you like to show them what you've done this week?
Sure. So the major feature or major thing I worked on was the feature flags, which will allow us to turn on and off certain components for certain users as we roll forward. So it's actually a pretty quick demo. If you see the admin screen here for our main app, you can see that I've got, as the admin, I have a whole list of features and who can see those features. So let me just go ahead and turn off one of these data input forms for this customer set. So you can see I clicked to turn that feature off. If I come back over here to the application, you can see I'm logged in as a certain user, which turned the feature off for. Let me refresh. And now you can see that is no longer available.
Oh, that's great.
So,
Yeah, I really like that.
awesome.
Cool. Show what you've done with the reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were able to kind of figure out the calculation, and I believe this report is going to solve their initial need for the rebate. So if you look up on the screen or here, you can see that they do have the new calculation there. I also kind of want to show you the unit test that we created to kind of verify that and the various different edge conditions, and I can actually run that separately. And I know it's just not very exciting to watch, but we did cover the different permutations as well.
Yeah, that's great. And so now our customer team will be able to run these reports and then deliver those to the board so we can get the rebates back, and you've incorporated all the new calculations that are coming into effect with the legislation.
Yes. So the other team will be able to do that as well.
I can't believe how much you guys accomplished in 2 weeks. I'm a little concerned. Our customer success team, they're already really busy. Having to do these reports, each time and submit those could be, it's an opportunity for them to get overwhelmed and not get things turned in.
Right.
Is there anything we can do about that? Them having to do this manually?
Sure. I mean, there are various ways that we could automate this. When there's value for that, let's put that in the next sprint, or potentially agreement for inclusion into the sprint before the end. But that's another conversation we'll need to have. In the meantime, we can deploy the feature as it is immediately, so that we can get the value out to the customers. And then at such time as the automation kicks in, we can simply uncheck that feature with the feature flags, so that the CSRs wouldn't have to do that anymore.
Yeah,
Let
so
the automation take it.
We'll get the new calculations in for the legislative mandate to get that in on time.
What? We can deploy mid-project?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of this whole iterative process. Every time that we complete a feature, we, irrespective of whether this feature may be added to in the future, we can deploy it to the customers right away so that we can get the value out to the customers. I mean, the discussion that we're having about potentially automating the reporting, that's an add. I mean, right now we have the ability for the customer service reps to go ahead and have those calculation reports sent. So We keep those in now, deploy it at such time as the automation feature gets implemented. We can disable the feature, just unchecking the feature flags for the customer service people doing it themselves. That way everyone wins, the value gets out to the client. I mean, it's the whole point of this iterative process.
I like it.
Excellent.
Okay, that's cool actually.
Well, good. Well, now that we have gone over the demo, let's move forward to another point.
Seems like the business is really happy.
Yeah, I guess I can see how they're starting to plan if they know what they're going to get every 2 weeks, and then they can give us the feedback. But they still gave us new requirements in the meeting.
Oh, that's beautiful. They gave you requirements for what they needed. So when we talked about the last mile and building a big project, how many of those features in those big projects were actually needed by the business?
Oh man, don't get me started on that. I really hated that. We had this long list of the last project had 800 features, and I remember being up till the midnight, many nights writing all the documentation on that, and they only used about 40 of them.
Well, I mean, this happens, right? Because when you're starting a brand new project and it's a big project, you kind of have this feeling of I got to get it all in because I only get one chance. Well, if you look at a project as you only get one chance, then you're going to fill it with so much stuff that you may or may not need because you don't want to find out you didn't need it. It's like going to the grocery store hungry. You're going to fill the basket with everything you possibly might want. But if you go to the grocery store more regularly and you make sure to eat before you get to the grocery store, then you're only going to pull the stuff off the shelf you need. And in a lot of ways, Agile's the same way. The business sees what they've gotten. They can make decisions about what they need next. And that's the key. They make decisions about what they need next.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because when I chatted with Michael afterwards, they had an unplanned business event with the customer service reps having to actually do more work than they were going to than they thought. So I mean, they were going to be overloaded if they had to run all those reports. I guess I'll give you that.
Yeah, there's the only way to see that is to get that product out there, get a chance to view it in production and use it, and then learn from that experience.
But how are the execs feeling about this?
Oh, you want to know how the execs? Oh, the execs. Yes, this is a classic question. How do the execs feel about it? Well, let's look at how the execs feel about it.
Oh, hey Michael, how are you doing?
Good.
Hey, I wanted to thank you for the great job you've done in transitioning from a business analyst role into the product owner role. It's really making a difference for us.
Yeah, it's been really good. This whole switch from Waterfall to Agile has been a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, and it gives me the ability to communicate with the customers better, let them know what's coming, show them things more often. So it's been good for me too. So thank you.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm coming out of a board meeting, and all the leadership is so excited because now we can finally plan. And we know how to budget for future projects because we can see the work that your team's doing. And every couple of weeks when you do a release, there's actual progress. And so instead of just this big surprise at the end, we know what's happening, and that helps us plan for future projects. So thank you so much. It's a huge difference for us.
Oh, awesome. That's great. Hey, I got a couple ideas I want to talk to you about, so maybe we can walk and talk together.
Hey, absolutely.
All right, good deal. Yeah. So what I was thinking we might be able to do for the next sprint would be.
So hey, Sid, I wanted to thank you for the work that you've done on the framework. It's really made a big difference for us. I can see it. There are changes happening all the time, and it's a real game changer for our customers. So thank you for everything you've done in helping make this transition to Agile. Great job. Wow.
All right, thanks everybody. This is going to be the Q&A portion